Hello there. I'm here with Stewart MacColl. Stewart MacColl was the senior pastor of Northwoods Presbyterian Church during a tremendous time in the life of our church. And on this celebration of our 50th anniversary, I thought we would pick Stewart's mind for some of the events and issues that he faced and some of the most memorable parts of his ministry. Enjoy. All right, so Stewart, the first question I have is, how did a Northeasterner like yourself end up serving as the pastor of a church in Houston, Texas?
Yeah, it's very, very complicated, but easy to explain. There were people who worked for oil companies, and they moved from the Northeast to Texas. And they had been members of the church that was in Connecticut. And they said Stewart MacColl's possible.
Terrific.
And they were members now of Northwoods.
All right, nice.
And Northwoods didn't have a church at that time. I mean, it was a sanctuary.
Okay. So that was during an interesting time in the community. North Harris County is growing.
Yeah.
But you were meeting in the gym, fellowship
Yeah,
hall.
yeah.
And then what led you to consider moving and building a sanctuary? And tell us a little bit about how that happened.
Well, when I moved here, we were worshiping in what's now your gym.
Right.
And it was pretty, I don't think it was my idea. I think they wanted to have a sanctuary. And
all right.
so it was built.
So it was built. But that's
We had a fundraiser, and the guy who came to fundraise was a fellow named Marshall, and he had been the fundraiser in Connecticut of a joint facility, a Episcopalian Presbyterian joint thing.
all right. So you had some experience with him.
Yeah.
And he helped you.
He was really good.
Well, tell us about those years. I mean, those were terrific years in the life of Northwoods.
Yeah, it grew rapid. It grew.
And what was leading to that? Why do you think that was part of what was taking place at Northwoods?
Oh, I think the area was growing, and our singles program, which I had nothing to do with, was exceptional, very good, and very effective. And we incorporated that. They incorporated that into the body of the church, but the whole this place was expanding and growing.
Okay, and but you also had some creative ways to do worship. One of your gifts is preaching, but also being creative. Tell us about that one incident with Charlie Trotter at worship one Sunday.
He would stand. Charlie he worked for an oil company, but he was an amateur theatrical person, an actor, and he stood up and objected to a sermon, and we had this dialogue, and it was very successful, and we produced several of them.
It caught people off guard before they knew that it was...
Yeah, and then for a while they said, to try to get him to sit down, and it was great fun. But then they all understood.
But an engaging way to do ministry.
Yeah, it was fun.
And
he enjoyed it because he enjoyed acting and so forth.
But it also gave a good reputation that Northwoods is a creative place, and your sermons were inspiring as well as intellectually stimulating. One of the kind of core values at that time was don't leave your brain at the door, but you're willing to love God with your heart, mind, soul, and strength. But you also had terrific ministries. The music ministry was apparently a very active
We had a
part in the church.
the choir had grew, and it was and I didn't really remember, but it stretched well past where the organ now is.
Right. Well, I think you had told me that had over 80 members.
Yeah.
But you did have some difficult seasons, like your director of music apparently died in a terrible crash. Tell us a little bit about that, or how the church responded, or.
Oh, well, he and his wife had both. She was hired to do children's music, and she did it marvelously, and he was the choir director, and as my wife said, the favorite person on the staff. He was marvelous.
Jeff Ross.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he was killed in an automobile accident.
That's terrible.
And the memorial service was at the church, which was, the choir was there in full body, in tears.
Yeah.
As was the rest of the congregation. But out of that she stayed, Nancy stayed as youth director, and we got a new choir master.
Right.
I don't know who that.
Maybe Dave Vandermeer after him, or it could have taken place someone. But one of the nice things about Nancy is that she ended up going into the ministry.
Yeah, no,
and in fact is going to preach at our church later in August this year.
She went.
Terrific.
She finally, she was a very gifted person musically and nice. Otherwise. And she married again, I think, didn't she? Yeah.
Well, all right. So during that time, Stewart, a lot of other ministries in the community formed. And in fact, why don't you grab that gavel that's on the... and I think that's a gavel for you being the president.
I was the president of NAM, yeah.
Of the board, maybe in the first few years.
Yeah.
And tell us, what can you tell us about how that started, how NAM started?
The Northwest Assistance Ministry started at Northwoods. Well, that was the first place we met. And I say that, and I don't remember very much about it, but and there was a director that was a brilliant woman. What was her name?
Oh gosh, I'm not sure. Anna, maybe, or
no. Anyway,
yeah.
She's the one who organized it.
Got it going.
Got its home.
And in fact, Northwoods was one of the 10 founding churches.
Yeah.
And I think you not only supported in being on the board, but financially, didn't Northwoods help to?
Yeah, Northwoods was the leading. They and one other church,
Cypress Creek.
Were the financially, but Northwoods was the outstanding giver.
Right. Yeah. But then a lot of ministries started through NAM that also got their assistance with Northwoods. For instance, I think the Meals on Wheels, the Interfaith Hospitality Network.
Well, they didn't have the building they now have, and so Northwoods was kind of
home base.
The home base for them.
Okay.
And when they moved to the new building, it was fine.
Yeah. But again, not only so
I don't remember all this.
yeah, well, and it's a terrific ministry and thrives today.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Oh, yeah.
changed from being more locally run by pastors and
Well,
churches.
that's right. It became more. The head of it is now a business person, is
Right.
not, and that was natural.
Yes, and now I think the annual budget's like $12 million.
Right.
They're doing tremendous work. You also had a nice team of people working with you, pastors.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about some of the pastors that you worked with.
We had 4 pastors and a staff of many more, and you caught me. I can't remember.
Well, you worked with your wife, Jane.
Well,
Tell us what she did in the church.
she was employed to for women's work originally, and she went back to seminary, and she got a degree from seminary, and she was ordained, and she became one of 4 pastors of the church at that time.
Right.
She was pastor, and who were the other 2? Rich Miller
Mm-hmm.
and Rob Morrison.
And Rob Morrison.
And Rob Morrison was really head of the whole Sunday school program,
Right.
and very, very good at that.
Rev Rob, they called him.
Rev Rob,
Yep.
and
A very dynamic time. Churches.
well, it was a booming time.
Yeah.
It was, people went to church in those days. They don't go to church anymore, but and it became obvious that we needed to build a building.
Yeah.
And they had this plot across from the present building, which was what is now the church school. The church school program, and we hired a fundraiser.
Okay.
And
Architect, all those things. Got it.
well, the architect, yes, but we. It was a major job,
Oh,
and
big time.
we used the same guy that we had used in Wilton to build a Episcopal Presbyterian complex,
Nice.
and he was very good. He was excellent.
Good. Well, also during that time, you had a number of young people that grew up in the church, and they also went into ministry.
Yeah.
And that's kind of exciting for the church. In fact, we're going to hear from them
Oh, good.
preaching this summer.
Good.
Nona Holy and Jim Teal and some of these people. So it's we're looking.
Good.
Holly Robertson. We're looking forward to it. So when you think of some of the most memorable times at Northwoods, we've talked before, but tell us about who Maddie was, what she was doing in the church, and what took place. And how did Northwoods respond?
She was already there when I came. She was hired as the janitor, actually. A maintenance person.
Right.
And but she was a genius with small children. They loved her, and she loved them, and she was marvelous. And she was accused of sexual child abuse by a person who came to the church only once, as far as I know, and left the child in Maddie's care, and she was accused.
So then here's a beloved employee,
Right,
who is charged, and then
she was. It's now grown dim, but she was proclaimed guilty.
Right. Right. Kind of like arrested.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and it was in the day when properly, child molestation was considered, very bad, and particularly in churches.
Right.
And it was a big case.
Yeah. And being African American probably didn't help her situation.
No, probably not.
Yeah. And so, how did the church deal with that? How did you deal with that? With Maddie's being accused of this crime.
The church was phenomenal. It simply said she could not have done this, and we went to the
court,
wherever,
yeah.
And but they were phenomenal. There wasn't anybody. If there was anybody, I don't remember it. Most people said she could not have done this. She is our caregiver, and she's been our child care as well as our maintenance person, and it was incredible.
So it must have been quite a relief and a lot of joy when she was exonerated from that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And to stick with her.
It was. I'm too old now. I don't remember, but I remember that. Everybody stood and clapped and so forth. I don't know.
Very powerful.
Yeah.
So, but Maddie's being in the church was so important that tell us what happened when you moved from the gym to the sanctuary.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what happened that day.
We began the Sunday in the gym where we had been worshiping, and then halfway through the service, I don't know which we had. In those days, we had 3 services,
right?
But I think it was must have been the main the 10 o'clock service. Maddie led the group to the new sanctuary.
The procession.
Yeah.
And were the children with her?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And how powerful that was.
Yeah.
To this person who meant so much to the church is leading to a new chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very powerful. You've always had a heart, Stewart, for the underdog. I don't know, as we've met together and had breakfasts, where does that come from, or why have you, how come you've had that perspective of helping to support those who are in difficulty?
That's interesting. I can't tell you where it came from. Yes, it's part of every good church ministry, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. And
you've also served. Why don't you grab that plaque there? You also served on our denominational's program mission agency.
I did.
Go ahead and flip that around. Let's see if we can take a look at that. And this was in recognition of your work. And that also gave you some good perspective. Yes.
Yeah.
And because of that, then somehow you got to see more.
Well, the program agency was in those days was a combination of national and international work, and because I served as in the program agency, I went overseas for the national church, for the Presbyterian Church USA, and I went to the Far East.
And because of that, Northwoods has always been
Yeah.
a leading church in
Right.
of all the churches around the country that give to One Great Hour
Right.
of Sharing.
Well, One Great Hour of Sharing was a pet of mine. I mean, I saw its work. I mean, firsthand, and I came back from that trip inspired.
Yeah. Well, and it must have been contagious because the church was inspired.
Well, they gave, it was a major effort, and which the church responded to.
Very nice. Well, we have over the years, it's
Yeah.
phenomenal how people have been generous.
Yeah.
And some of that is the gift of being able to see mission firsthand and
Yeah.
sharing the
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah.
That it's not just people that are hungry. Let me tell you about one
Yeah.
I met.
Yeah.
Very nice, Stuart. But there were some challenges in ministry that, sometimes ministry isn't like the textbook when we were in seminary. And culturally, politically, it's a difficult, it can be difficult when you lead a diverse congregation.
Why were we picketed?
So, tell us. I mean, you were, I think, helpful in the church helping to support a new Planned Parenthood in Northwest Harris County.
Yeah, that may have been why. Yeah.
And I think you had served on the national board of Planned Parenthood.
Well, I did later. Yeah.
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 And
Northwoods financed it was on
1960, wasn't it?
No, it was now on 1960.
Okay.
But it was
somewhere nearby.
They financed they financed the whole thing.
Okay.
There was no service for women in the area.
Okay.
And it was kind of a normal social action thing for Northwoods to do.
Okay.
But
so how does your session, realizing the political nature of these things?
They did, and it didn't. They said this is the right thing to do.
And why did you feel like it was the right thing to do?
Because there was no place at that time for women to go for Planned Parenting.
Okay.
In the area.
All right.
And Northwoods financed it.
Right. And if I remember, but tell me if I'm wrong, it wasn't for abortions. The clinic that
No.
It was family planning.
Planning. Yeah.
And things like that,
Yeah.
which.
It wasn't. It wasn't really. They were picketing it because they didn't believe in Planned Parenthood.
Right. And so tell us about what that must have been like. There's a story about you and Jane giving donuts to these picketers on Sunday morning. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that. And how did the church deal with it?
The police were very good. The county police. They kept the picketers beyond the fence on the street, and they were not supposed to come into any part of the property of the church.
Okay.
And as long as they were on street, they had the right to be there. I mean, there was nobody. And one Sunday morning, Jane, who was then part of the staff, and I went down and with donuts or whatever we had and served them.
Right. And the church members had to go through this, didn't they?
They had to go to church. They had to pass through these people, and they were told. It's foggy in my memory, but they were told they were not allowed to stand in the streets to prevent people from coming in.
Right.
And we had to have the county people come and see to that,
Right.
so forth and so on.
But it also did attendance go down?
No, it went up. I was amazed because I thought, people had to pass through picket lines to come to church.
Right.
Literally, and the attendance went up.
Huh. Interesting.
And I think in part because people were interested that any church would be doing this.
Okay.
And people came. We had a very active singles program then, but I don't remember. One would have thought that the church would have problems, but in those days, it was easier than it is for you.
Not as polarized.
Yeah.
As
Well, no, it was not as secular.
Yeah. Oh, as a whole society.
As a whole society, yeah.
Well, we've talked over the years about ministry,
Yeah.
and it's a challenge.
It's different.
It's a different day. How is today, like you see it differently than when you began ministry, how many decades ago? What do you see? How has society changed?
Well, when we moved to the South, all over, it's just become more secular.
More secular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And church going is not part and parcel of young people's lives anymore, I don't think.
Right. It's more and more challenging,
Yeah.
definitely. You also had, you were pastoring during the ups and downs with ordination issues for the denomination on votes to ordain or not ordain gay elders and pastors.
Yeah.
And during your ministries, one of your staff members came out and went through a divorce and then got with a partner. Tell us a little bit about Northwood's response and your response to his situation.
I had forgotten all about that. You're right. That the music director, who was beloved, separated from his wife, who went to
She worked at Memorial Drive.
Memorial Drive, I think.
Right.
And took up with a man. Mm-hmm. And I went to the session and I said, you should know all this.
What's happening?
What's happening. And you should, he's a staff person, and you have every right to know what's happening with him as an employee of the church. And it was remarkable. The session said, Stewart, is he doing his job? And I said, yes. And he said, then what business is it of ours who he's married to?
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
And I look at that, I don't think there are many sessions that would have said that.
Especially during that season.
Well, yeah, I mean, but they literally, I thought they would have, they said, if he's not doing his job, come back and tell us.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we don't want to hear any more about it. that was remarkable.
I looked at that and hear it, and you go, in our mission statement, we celebrate God's grace.
Yeah.
We want to be part of grace-filled actions,
Yeah.
not more judgment in the world.
Yeah.
That's a powerful story, Stuart. What about, as you think of Northwoods, this is our 50th year anniversary. What would be a hope or dream that you would have for Northwoods for the next season for our church?
I'm too old. You
You're
shouldn't
too
ask.
old?
I shouldn't ask. I think Northwoods has, and not because of me, but it's always stood on the edge of doing what they thought God called them to do.
Yeah. And in the long run, if we are open to hearing God's call and doing what God's call is, that's when real ministry takes place. Well, Stuart, on behalf of our church, we want to thank you for your leadership and the way that you've helped us build on such a great foundation as we move ahead.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you for your friendship.